So you look at the left-hand one as you swing back, much better backswing now in terms of top. Now you kind of move off that a little bit, so we want to try and get that sensation that we're turning into that right hip a little bit more, okay? But you are still making a much fuller backswing. In the past, I've seen your backswing kind of almost there, not much longer than that. So you are making a much more completed backswing. But here now, as we start coming, so that see the right foot lifting and the toe going that way, your weight now's on your toes, and it looks a little bit kind of stuck. And yeah, the thing is, you were swinging the club well, hitting some nice shots because you kind of knew where yourself was in terms of the body and the hands, but it's always going to lend itself to the odd one of them or a flicky one or whatever. So it's getting that sensation. Now, this is obviously a shorter shot, admittedly, okay, but turning into that right hip is better there. I think when you go further back is when you start moving off it a little bit, so it's getting into that right side more. Then as you start back down now, even on these shorter shots, you can sort of see yourself coming forward. It's not as much. I think if we just look at that club there, that's just before impact, and that's a similar kind of position there. And we just look at that. Oops, yeah, get that one. Yeah, exactly. That foot's kind of lifting up off the ground there. You can sort of see the elbow is sort of trying to find some space. Just look at the relationship with your hands there with the leg. I mean, the left-hand one, you look a bit at here, whereas the right-hand one, you got a bit more here. And like I said, we're trying to create space, not look for space, yeah? You create space by this staying back, and then your arms have that ability to kind of swing through on this direction. If you try to look for space over here somewhere, you bring the club out and around, and then it's the unmentionable or whatever, the odd one. And every now and then you get that one just because of that's golf, unfortunately. But yeah, that's the move that's going to cause that more often. Like I say, the swing before the start was decent. You're making a good movement. There was a lot of good things in your swing, but it was just lending itself to a potential that you could hit some of those shots. And that weaker one you said you got was just you sort of hanging on the club face to impact and just thinning it. Hands were a bit behind the ball. You weren't sort of moving onto that left side quite so much, yeah? So just stopping and almost the right leg, as we saw there, going forward. So if your right leg is doing that motion, yeah, now try and move to the left at the same time and you'd fall over. So it's very hard to get into that position. So if the lower half can kind of move this way, as you can see, look at the knee movement there and the footwork, how much more space you're going to have now because the knee's not moving towards the goal, it's moving towards your left knee, yeah? Yeah. So that movement there now is going to be much more efficient for space, as opposed now to here when you go into the golf ball, that knee going towards there, your arms are going to try and go out, and then that's when you sort of have to rise the handle up. Otherwise, if you don't, you're going to hit the old one of them. So yeah, so it's work on that left hip. I think I'd work on that with that left hip and the small little shots, just feel that kind of pushing back away with the leg, just to get that kind of sensation of how the leg moves. And it's just doing that to a point where it just becomes more and more natural. It's not going to happen straight away, obviously, but I think understanding, and again, it's a fair question. It was asked and you answered it truthfully. I said, what do you think about when you move your hips? And a lot of people don't think about actually how they move their hips, yeah? But if you try and feel like you're going to try and pivot your right hip this way, you are going to twist it towards the golf ball. Yeah. If the left leg pushes backwards, the right hip kind of gets pulled behind you, yeah? And then the right hip just replaces that space. So it's just making that move. And what you'll find, obviously, when you're doing that a few times with the one hand, you might find a bit shallower, flatter swing, so the ground's not quite as close to where it used to be. But yeah, getting that sensation of how that club's going to work around the body and move the left or left. That was with your right arm kind of just doing this. When you've got one hand on the golf, it often gets sort of out of control, flung outwards that way. So I wouldn't put that down to the movement being poor. That was just your right arm making a one-arm swing. Even that guy, that coach, Mike Malaska, was doing off a tee-peg, chipping a wedge. So that's the one, a decent player who could play golf. If he's using a tee-peg to make it easier, then yeah, we could do that and stuff. But yeah, you could use two-handed to get that sensation, that movement with that left leg is kind of pushing backwards, so the left leg pushes back, left hip gets out of the way, just gives you space, yeah? And for chipping and pitching purposes there, but that's going to be your chipping technique, yeah? The left hip becomes kind of the lead pulling out the way, and when you finish the shot there, you can see you finish now with the club in front of your chest. The club now, because the left hip's going back, everything's going round left, yeah? You don't have to then try and pull your arms around the corner, because we said that stuff in the past we said about with your arm path, yeah? So left hip moving backwards or pushing backwards, going to give you that sensation of, that was more a topic to be fair, rather than a shank. So, but yeah, pull that left hip back, gets that lower half working better. Okay, buddy?